We're ready to move on to our second speaker, and that is Pavel Krasnopolski, and he'll talk to us about his journey through the Atacama Desert. Go ahead, Pavel.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Pavel Krasnopolski. I'm talking from my home in North York. This is my first presentation for the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, so I'm a bit nervous. I only recently became a member in May, and for this first talk, I decided to tell a story of my trip to Chile in 2019, 5 years ago. So this is how it began. So my personal journey into astronomy began in 2017 for the so-called Great American Eclipse, which I watched in Missouri. It was a total solar eclipse. And of course, you could drive there from Toronto, which I did. As you can see from this picture, I was quite ambitious with my setup. Of course, being the first time experiencing a total solar eclipse, I didn't really have the feeling of how quickly it happens, where to look. I knew that, I read about it, but still, things happened much more quickly than I expected, and the equipment didn't work the way I expected. So I didn't really get any pictures, but the first experience was, of course, stunning, as anybody who experienced a total solar eclipse will tell you. So I decided I definitely need to go and watch another one. And I started looking. And apparently the next eclipse was in 2019, in the middle of the summer, well, for us in the Northern Hemisphere, in Chile. And I just thought, wait a second, well, Chile is the prime astronomical location. So this is pretty much just a treat that it happened. The path of totality went through exact places where a lot of observatories, world-class observatories, were located. Of course, it was at close to the sunset, so it was the end of the path of totality, and it was around 5 p.m., I think. And the path of totality went very close to several observatories in La Silla that belongs to European Southern Observatory, and then a multitude of them on Cerro Tololo, Cerro Pachon, and Las Campanas. Well, one thing that I wanted to remember right now looking there, you can see that the middle of the path of totality goes inland, which is mountainous, near the town of Vicuña, which is, eventually I decided to watch it there. And it's essentially a single valley that goes from the coast inland. Just, you probably are already guessing where this goes. But for now, I didn't think, at the moment, I didn't think about this. So I started planning and researching, and just a little bit of theory now of why Chile is such an excellent spot for astronomy. First of all, it sits right on the coast of the Pacific, where there is this so-called Humboldt current, which is very cold. It flows from Antarctica. It produces very thin layer of turbulence and convection and moisture, which which stays very low over the ocean. And because most of the desert is elevated above the ocean, it doesn't experience any of that disturbance. On the other side, in the east, it's limited by the Andes Mountains, which are quite tall, which give the rain shadow from all of the rainforest in the east. And it's also quite empty. There's low light pollution. But yes, it does experience some strong earthquakes. It sits near the fault line. So all of the observatories have to be built with that in mind. Just to illustrate that, the Humboldt current, and You can see the moisture produced by the ocean from there. That picture was actually from the satellite today. You can see all the moisture just goes away from the continent. And the skies are perfectly clear over the coastal Chile. And of course, you also have the high mountains. In the picture on the right, you can see the so-called high plains or altiplano, which sit at about 5,000 meters, which means there's less atmosphere above them, and which means there's less moisture. So you can, for example, set up a radio telescope with moisture not interfering. One of my destination was there. Just another illustration of that. This was also taken today. The boundary layer essentially sits within the first kilometer of the atmosphere. And you can see that above about 2 kilometers, there is quite stable atmosphere, stable air. And of course, the astronomers have taken advantage of that. But I guess enough of the theory. So I started planning. One great inspiration that I found was on the website called Cloudy Nights. It's actually an excellent resource on everything concerning astronomy, amateur observing. And the article was called 6 Months Observing Upside Down. It's from 2017. Also, you need to take into account that, of course, all of the best accommodations, especially concerning astronomy, would be fully booked many months in advance. Well, there's also the eclipse, so just crowds of regular people were also moving there. And well, unfortunately, I somewhat procrastinated, and 2 months prior, it was all fully booked. So I didn't get to visit, for example, Space Ops and similar places that offer you actually the accommodation with telescope time, which you can rent. But I could still book a tour of the VLT. That's the Very Large Telescope, belonging again to ESO, European Southern Observatory. And you'll see my visit there later. So this was the plan. It would involve flying from Santiago of Chile to Antofagasta, a big industrial city, and then renting cars in both of the cities to explore around. So usually people will go into the more inland, into the higher mountains through San Pedro de Atacama. It's quite a touristy town, a bit crowded, but then you also get to visit this radio telescope called ALMA, Atacama Large Millimeter Array. And of course, most other destinations are along the shore. So I landed in Santiago and decided to, and then I, of course, took the airplane to Antofagasta. And this is where the first part of my journey began. I decided to title it No Water, No Air. And it concerns ALMA, the radio telescope that takes advantage of high altitude and extreme dryness of Atacama Desert. And so this is my flight from Santiago to Antofagasta. This is how most of Atacama looks like. There's pretty much no vegetation. You can see Andes in the distance with the snowy summits. And there's something else that you might see here if you know where to look. So, so this group of structures is the Very Large Telescope. In front, you see the actual telescope on the summit of Cerro Paranal. And then there is the village with residences and industrial buildings. There is also a small telescope on the side called Vista. And in the distance, there is a place under construction. It still is under construction 5 years later, although mostly finished, which is the mountain called Cerro Armazones, where they are making the extremely large telescope. You can maybe make out the top is leveled already, prepared for the construction. So anyway, this was my first impression, first thing I saw of the Atacama Desert, and it already had telescopes in it. The ALMA itself is a collection of 66 microwave antennas, 12 meters in diameter. Those are large dishes. It's situated at an altitude of 5,000 meters on a plateau called Chaknantar. The air pressure is only half the normal, so you might experience altitude sickness or weakness. So you need to be prepared for that visit and maybe spend some days at intermediate altitude. Most people choose San Pedro de Atacama. But you can use nearby mountains to actually look at the telescope that are open. Basically, it's a desert. You can go pretty much anywhere. And there's this Cerro Toco, the mountain close by. Just to give you the impression of the geography there. So San Pedro de Atacama is the touristy town, kind of. And you can basically just drive from there to the altitude of 5,000 meters. This big road goes all the way to the Altiplano and then over the border into Argentina. The Chaknantar Plateau is on the right. That's the this kind of scientific preserve or something like that. And Cerro Toco is nearby, so you can easily see the plateau from there. I didn't get to go to the mountain, to the summit of the mountain itself, because, well, it's quite physically challenging. And that's what I saw from the slopes of Cerro Toco. So first of all, you're already very high up. You can see the rocks are yellow, so there's sulfur from the volcanoes, there is smell. But in the distance was the Chaknantar Plateau with the telescopes scattered around it. My understanding is that those telescopes can be moved from time to time to create different arrangements to look at, well, maybe at different angles, maybe look at objects with different resolution. By the way, the recent images of black holes were created by an arrangement of observatories, this ALMA included. I tried using my binoculars to get a better view. So those are the dishes. Yes, they're 12 meters in diameter. Now the atmosphere is very thin. You can physically feel it. It's you always feel exhausted at 5,000 meters. But that's very helpful for microwave astronomy because obviously the water vapor would prevent radio waves, especially high-frequency radio waves, of prevented from penetrating the atmosphere. And I think the frequency range goes up to 1 terahertz, so 1,000 gigahertz. Atmospheric absorption becomes very important there. But in any case, it's not just a place where you can, well, look at the telescopes. It's just a stunning view all around. Anyway, so after that, that was a brief visit there. I returned, well, into the denser air. I returned to Antofagasta to actually go to the tour of the VLT, the Very Large Telescope that I booked previously. And here's the location. So you have the Cerro Paranal, which is the location of the VLT. And nearby you have Cerro Armazones, which is the future location of the Extremely Large Telescope, the ELT. And they're surprisingly close to the ocean. So you can see the scale of 5 kilometers there. So Cerro Paranal may be about 15 kilometers from the shore. But despite this proximity, there is absolutely no effects of the ocean where the telescope is located, thanks to that cold Humboldt current, which keeps all of the marine layer pretty much at the shore. Well, I had to get up early and drive to the VLT. It's only about 1 hour drive from Antofagasta a big industrial city. Got a company of some bikers there. Excellent view, just absolutely stunning landscapes. And something awesome that I noticed is that all of the observatories will have road signs, not just with the title, just boring words there, but this cute little picture with stars in it. So Chile really values its position in the world as the prime astronomical site, and it really welcomes observatories there, and really tries to make them happy. Anyway, so the drive continued. The Sierra Amazonas was the turn towards the VLT, and then the next turn, of course, was to Cerro Paranal, which is the site of the VLT. Eventually, you go on the this winding road on the into the mountains, and gradually you start seeing the signs that urge you to dim the headlights. So the cars that go there at night will not interfere with observations. Actually, despite dimming the headlights, you still are safe because there are really dim yellow lights along the edges of the road. Actually, you might actually see one right in front of the hood of my car here. Those are lights that lit up at night. And basically, beyond a certain point, you must turn off all the lights in your car. And eventually, you get up and you see the VLT on the top of the mountain. So VLT itself, it consists of 4 big telescopes, just over 8 meters in diameter, with a bunch of smaller auxiliary telescopes. And on the right here in this frame, you can see there is a large parking lot, essentially. That's where people often go stargazing. My understanding is this is still outside of the actual property of the VLT, but obviously I think it goes without saying that if anybody goes observing there, it's essential to not interfere with the telescopes. So all of your lights must be off, no flashlights, nothing like that. Actually, later that day, I went observing at night in this exact spot. There were a couple of people who were using flashlights, and that was very inconsiderate. But for now, I was going to the tour. And this is how it happens. So first you arrive at the gate, and you can see the ocean in the distance. So it's really, really close. Of course, the atmosphere was perfectly clear all the time. You get to the gate. You do a bit of a tour in the building right at the gate there. You are given some hard hats because you will be going inside the telescopes, which is essentially an industrial object. It's an industrial place. And they ask you to keep the curtains in the bus closed because of the ultraviolet light. But eventually you are bussed to the top, to the summit, and there's a lengthy tour. There's tour guides available in most languages, at least in most European languages, probably in Chinese and Indian. I'm not sure. Lots of tourists from Europe. And of course, when you go inside, first you go inside the scientific kind of engineering building. You immediately start seeing that this is truly a playground for scientists, for engineers. You can see people don't just work there, they enjoy their time. For example, There's some inside humor. So of course, the resolution of these telescopes is the reason why they were built. The large mirrors provide extremely high resolution, and the place itself has well-known, very excellent seeing. So atmospheric seeing is essentially the turbulence that causes the stars to twinkle. And in this place, there's pretty much no turbulence. And then we get to go into the main telescope domes. You can see the mirror itself down there. You can see the secondary mirror up on the structure. It's an absolutely monstrous, monumental structure. And to think that they managed to make it accurate to within less than a wavelength of light is, of course, a huge engineering achievement. But despite this, the structures that are accurate to the smaller than the wavelength of light still need to be maintained. So you do see just regular industrial scenes around. Well, you can still probably think of it as a playground for technicians. Of course, you also see the steam. You can see it pouring from under the sensors of the telescope. The sensors are cooled by liquid nitrogen. Then there is the residence. That's where people live and spend, well, not the nights, but their sleep. And actually, when you go visit, you must stay very quiet because a lot of astronomers sleep during the day, and at night they observe. It's absolutely beautiful inside. There's a pool, and an interesting thing about it, that pool there is not for swimming. It's for maintaining the humidity that's tolerable to humans. Outside, the humidity can go all the way to single digit of percent, and usually does, which is why this is such an excellent location for astronomy, but not as good for, well, for pretty much anything else to live. It's very hard on your throat, your nose. After several hours there, you will start experiencing the dryness. So after the VLT, I also went to look at the future site of the ELT, the Extremely Large Telescope. You might see the mountain with a flattened top. That was its state in 2019. By this time, now 5 years later, they started to build the dome itself already. But back then it was just a foundation, and they only leveled the mountain. Of course, you cannot go directly into the construction site, so that's the closest I could get. Well, just driving from there was an absolutely stunning view again. You can see the VLT again in the distance. You can actually see the two telescopes from each other. Those are rather tall mountains. The desert is absolutely lifeless, but also absolutely vast and mind-blowing. So anyway, that night I decided that I should definitely return to that parking lot and do well, at least see how it looks like, how the sky looks like in the prime astronomical location. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have some good equipment back then, so I'll have to use a picture from ESO. But I can testify that this is pretty much how it looks like in person. Now, this is, of course, is a panoramic picture, so it's a fisheye lens. But several things to note. First thing that immediately just blows your mind is the number of stars that you see. Right? It's not a sprinkle of stars; it's essentially a carpet. Any area of the sky that you look at will have a star in it. And if you look very, very hard between the stars, there are more stars between them. The Milky Way, this being the southern hemisphere, is right above you. The center of the Milky Way is actually in the southern latitudes. You do see the Magellanic Clouds, and surprisingly, you see all of the colors in the Milky Way. Usually you don't, because it requires dark adaptation and your eyes don't see color very well at night. But things like the Carina Nebula, extremely bright red spot in the sky. And something that I noticed is that, yes, I brought my telescope and binoculars, but I ended up spending most of the time just staring at the sky with my bare eyes. It's because this is how you get the most unusual experience. There you can actually feel the immersion in the space. It's not just a picture that's in the sky. You feel that you are on this planet that's physically in the middle of this enormous object, the Milky Way. You feel the full presence. And yes, the stars don't twinkle at all. There's the sky was perfectly still. There's absolutely no no seeing, no scintillation. Scintillation is also an effect of turbulence, where the stars seem brighter and dimmer, well, essentially twinkling. And by the way, the laser guide stars from the VLT are not that intrusive, which I thought they would be, because those are just very powerful lasers shooting in the sky. But the atmosphere is so clear that there isn't much scattering. That was definitely the most unusual, the most fascinating experience I've ever had in doing amateur astronomy up to this day. So, all right, my next destination was in the area of La Serena, and well, you would assume that being a desert, that would be almost empty, right? So I was going there to watch the eclipse finally. Well, maybe not so much empty. It seemed that most of Chile, maybe a good part of Argentina, a good part of Europe, and some crazies from North America like me descended upon Chile. Pretty much everything that could be rented was. You can see the taxis had the announcements essentially painted on them. All pieces of land were for rent, for parking or for camping. People were renting out vans to sleep in. It was absolutely crazy. And so remember that this valley, which is called Elqui Valley, was pretty much directly on the path of totality for the eclipse, and it was the only accessible area in the vicinity of the eclipse. Eventually I got there and started setting up and looking around. And of course, there are those other observatories here. I believe this is Cerro Tololo Observatory, which essentially on the mountain towering over the Elqui Valley, easily visible. And yes, eventually I started setting up for my eclipse observing. By the way, the observatory is still on the mountain there in the distance, in the background. Found a clear spot, set up the telescope. That was the second experience of eclipse I had. This time, there was actually a farm nearby, so I could hear the animals first going quiet, and then as the eclipse approached, just going crazy because, well, obviously animals don't understand what's happening. And total solar eclipse could be a scary or extremely disturbing sight, even for people who know what to expect. Eventually, yes. Obviously, the totality came. I don't think I had good pictures from there, but probably this frame is the best that I could possibly get. And as you remember, this was in the evening, so it was time to head back. And apparently this is what everybody else in the valley also thought. And so my experience for the next 6 hours was essentially this. It took me until midnight from the sunset that happened during the eclipse, more than 6 hours to get to La Serena, only 50 kilometers. This was definitely the worst traffic jam I ever had as well. But eventually I got there. I got back to Santiago, flew back to North America. And this was pretty much the end of my experience. Definitely the most unbelievable experience, and especially in astronomy, in my life. I definitely want to go again to Chile sometime, and it should be longer than 10 days. I'll want to go there for a couple of months when I do. So that concludes my talk. Do you have any questions?
Pavel, thank you so much for presenting to us, and welcome to the RAC Toronto Centre as a new member. You did a great job conveying your experience and how amazing it was being there. The video clips were also really well done and really helped us experience it as well. So thank you very much and well done. Ennio, do we have any questions for Pavel?
We have a question, and let me start by saying, agreed, very well done. That was quite interesting. We have a question from Lewis R., who asks, did you do this trip alone?
Yes, I did it alone, actually. I don't know. I just find it easier to plan everything out because I don't have to mind other people traveling with me, and yes, I did it alone. I don't think I had any difficulties arising from that. Chile is a very safe country. Well, obviously there's some petty theft and stuff like that, but there's very little of violent crime or something like that, so you don't need to worry about much. Also, the wildlife isn't really dangerous. Well, there isn't much life in Atacama Desert in the first place, but even with that, the well, you don't have millions of spiders or snakes or anything like that.
Cool. We have a point brought up by Betty Reed. The Atacama Desert is the driest desert in the world. Chile is also geographically interesting. It's 4,200 kilometers long and approximately 180 kilometers wide at its greatest width. And one clarification that Andrew Beaton brought up from his talk previously. Lewis R., I misremembered. M22 has 83,000 stars with a combined mass of around 500,000 stars. I had the number right, but the wrong fact. And that's all we have.
Sorry, is there a question?
Nope, there are no other questions.
All right, sir.
All done with questions. All right, thank you, Ennio, and thank you very much, Pavel.